Thought I knew my granddaughter. I thought she was just shy. That's what everyone told me anyway. She's just shy, Dad. She'll come around, but there's a difference between shy and silent. And it took me 63 years of living to understand that some children go quiet, not because they have nothing to say, but because they've learned that saying things out loud gets people hurt. Her name is Lily. No, wait, not Lily. That's her mother's name for her, the soft one, the one she uses when she wants something. My granddaughter's real name is Cecelia. She was named after my late wife. I'm the only one who still calls her that. I'm getting ahead of myself. That's what happens when you're 67 and you've been sitting on a story for the better part of a year, turning it over in your mind every morning while the coffee brews, trying to figure out where it really started. I think it started before I knew it did. That's usually how these things go. My name is Leonard Pruitt. I retired from 31 years of teaching high school history in Dayton, Ohio. My wife, Cecelia, the original, passed 8 years ago from ovarian cancer. We had one child, a son named Dominic. Dominic married a woman named Sylvia when he was 26, and I'll be honest with you, I never entirely trusted her. Not because she was unkind exactly. She was always perfectly pleasant. She remembered my birthday. She sang Christmas cards, but there was something behind her eyes that reminded me of certain students I'd had over the years, the ones who were very good at telling you exactly what you wanted to hear. Cecelia, my granddaughter, 4 years old at the time, was born with a condition called selective mutism. It's not deafness. It's not a cognitive delay. It's anxiety, essentially, a profound, almost physical inability to speak in certain situations around certain people. At home with her parents, she apparently talked fine. Around me, she'd never said a single word in her life. Not one. When she looked at me, she'd blink those big brown eyes that look exactly like my wife's and she'd reach for my hand. But she'd never said a word. The doctors said not to push her. They said to just be present, be consistent, be safe. So that's what I did. Every Sunday, I'd drive the 20 minutes to their house in Centerville, and I'd sit on the floor with Cecelia and we'd do puzzles, or she'd show me drawings, or we'd watch whatever nature documentary she was currently obsessed with. We had a whole language between us that didn't use words. I figured that was enough. I told myself it was enough. I should have paid more attention to the puzzle she put in my lap the winter before everything happened. She'd drawn something on the back of one of the pieces in crayon, a small blue crayon house with what looked like 2 figures inside and 1 figure outside, standing alone. When I picked it up and looked at it, she watched me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I smiled at her and set it aside. I thought it was just a drawing. Kids draw houses. I think about that drawing a lot now. The call came on a Thursday afternoon in late February. Dominic. He sounded rushed, the way he always did. My son has operated at a frequency of low-grade urgency for most of his adult life, and I'd long since stopped trying to figure out whether something was genuinely wrong or whether that was just how he moved through the world. He said Sylvia had a work trip. A conference in Denver, 4 days. He had a closing. He works in commercial real estate that he couldn't push back. Could Cecelia stay with me? Just the 4 days, Friday to Monday. I said yes before he finished asking. I'd never had her to myself for more than an afternoon. The idea of 4 whole days, 4 mornings of cereal and cartoons, 4 evenings of reading on the couch. I won't pretend I wasn't a little bit happy about it. Selfish, maybe. But I was happy. He dropped her off Friday evening with a rolling suitcase that had a unicorn on it and a Ziploc bag of her medications. She has a mild allergy to certain tree pollens, so she takes a small antihistamine daily. There was also a new prescription bottle I didn't recognize, a white and orange cylinder from a pharmacy I'd never heard of, over in Springboro. I asked Dominic what it was. He said it was something new, her pediatrician had prescribed, for sleep. She'd been having trouble sleeping, he said, anxious at night. He said to give her half a tablet around 7:30, that it would help her settle down. I looked at the bottle. The label had her name on it, Cecelia Marie Pruitt Donovan. The prescribing doctor was listed as a Dr. T. Warwick. I'd never heard that name before. Cecilia's regular pediatrician was a woman named Dr. Okafor, over at Dayton Children's. I noticed the prescription had been filled only 2 days earlier. Something felt off. I couldn't tell you exactly what, just that small, quiet prickling at the back of the neck that you learn to trust when you get old enough. I set the bottle on the kitchen counter and told Dominic I'd make sure she took it. I did not give her the medication that night. I told myself it was because I wanted to call Dr. Okafor's office first to confirm she knew about the new prescription. That was the reasonable explanation. The other explanation, the one I didn't let myself look at too directly, was something uglier, and I wasn't ready to look at it yet. Cecelia and I had a good first night. Grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and ate with the focused seriousness of a person doing important work. When she finished, she looked at me and gave me a thumbs up, which I understood to mean the meal had met her standards. I told her my late wife would have been very honored. She smiled at that. She has her grandmother's smile exactly. It starts slow on one side before the other catches up, like it can't quite believe it's allowed to be that happy. I read her 2 chapters of Charlotte's Web before bed. She fell asleep with her hand curled near her chin, which is apparently something she's done since she was an infant. I stood in the doorway for a moment longer than I needed to. Saturday, I called Dr. Okafor's office. It was a Saturday, so I got the answering service, but I left a message asking them to confirm the new prescription for Cecelia. I also looked up Dr. T. Warwick online. I found a Thomas Warwick, a general practitioner with a practice in Springboro, not a pediatrician. His reviews were fine, nothing alarming. But a general practitioner was not who should be prescribing sleep medication to a 6-year-old. I held the bottle up to the kitchen light. The pills were small and pale yellow. I photographed the label with my phone. I didn't give her the medication Saturday night either. I told myself that was fine, that one missed dose of a sleep aid was not going to hurt her. She slept fine without it. She slept like a stone, actually. I checked on her twice. Sunday was our best day. We drove out to Cox Arboretum and walked the trails for 2 hours. Cecelia has a thing for moss. She stopped to examine every patch of it she found, crouching down with her nose 6 inches from the ground, deadly serious. At one point she tapped my arm and pointed to a particularly impressive specimen on the side of a fallen log and looked at me with an expression that clearly meant, "Are you seeing this?" I told her it was the finest moss I'd ever seen in my life. She seemed satisfied. On the way home, we stopped for ice cream. She got mint chocolate chip and made a face after the first bite that suggested she had not made the correct choice, then continued eating it determinedly, because she is, above all things, not a quitter. She gets that from my wife, too. That evening I was washing up after dinner when I heard her behind me. I didn't turn around right away because she's often behind me. She'd taken to following me around the house at a comfortable distance over the past few days, like a cat deciding whether to fully commit. But then I heard something else, something that froze my hands in the soapy water. A voice. Small, barely there, rough with disuse, the way a door sounds when it hasn't been opened in a long time. Grandpa. I turned around very slowly because I was afraid that if I moved too fast I would break whatever this was. Cecelia was standing in the kitchen doorway in her socks. Her hands were at her sides. She was looking at me with an expression I will spend the rest of my life trying to describe. It was fear and relief and something that looked almost like exhaustion, as if she'd been carrying something heavy for a very long time and had finally decided to set it down. I crouched down to her level. I didn't say anything. I just waited. She took one step toward me and then she said, "Don't give me the white pills. Daddy said they'll make me not remember things." I sat down on the kitchen floor. Not on purpose. My legs just quit. I sat down on the linoleum with my back against the cabinet and I looked at my granddaughter, who had not spoken a single word in my presence for 6 years, and I tried to make sure my face did not show her how hard my heart was beating. "What did you say, sweetheart?" I said. "Can you say that again for me?" She nodded once, very solemn. "Daddy said they'll make me not remember things. He said that's the point." She paused. "He said you're going to try to take the house." I need to stop here for a moment and tell you something about the house. My wife and I bought our house in 1987, a 4-bedroom colonial on Elmhurst Drive, paid off entirely in 2009. After Cecelia died, I updated my will. The house, along with roughly $340,000 in retirement savings and investments, would go to Dominic. This was not a secret. Dominic knew. He had known for years. What Dominic did not know, what I had not yet told anyone, was that 3 months earlier I had met with my attorney and changed the terms. I had changed them because of Sylvia. Nothing I could prove. Just small things, accumulating. The way she'd started asking questions about the house over the past year. Casually. She was always casual about it. Have you thought about downsizing, Leonard? A man your age, alone in a 4-bedroom house? The time I caught her going through the filing cabinet in my home office during a holiday visit, and she'd smiled and said she was looking for a pen. The way Dominic had started calling more often, not to talk, exactly, just to check in, just to remind me he was there, just to mention once or twice that Sylvia knew a good estate attorney if I ever wanted to get things in order. I had gotten things in order. I'd put the house in a trust with a different attorney, one Dominic didn't know I'd used, and I'd named a former colleague of mine as the trustee. I hadn't told Dominic because I didn't know how to explain it without accusing him of something I couldn't prove. But now his 6-year-old daughter was standing in my kitchen telling me that the pills he'd sent along were supposed to make her not remember things. I asked Cecelia, very gently, where she'd heard Daddy say that. She told me she'd been in the back seat of the car, that Daddy and Mommy were talking in the front, that she was supposed to be asleep, but she wasn't. She said she was never asleep when they thought she was. I believed her immediately, and I think she knew I did, because something in her small shoulders released, a tension she'd been holding there that I hadn't even seen until it was gone. I asked her if she knew what the white pills were supposed to do. She said Daddy told Mommy they would make her confused and scared so that she'd stop talking to me at all, so that I'd think she was getting worse, so that maybe I'd think it was too much for me to have her around. I had to look at the ceiling for a moment. My son, who I had taught to ride a bike on that same Elmhurst Drive, who I had sat with through 2 broken bones and 1 bad heartbreak and the death of his mother. My son, who sent me a card every Father's Day, who called on my birthday, who was perfectly, pleasantly, carefully maintaining a relationship with me because I was worth approximately $590,000 and a 4-bedroom colonial, and he needed me to not look too closely at anything until the right moment. The white pills. Medication prescribed by a general practitioner that wasn't Cecilia's doctor, filled at a pharmacy 2 towns away, that was apparently supposed to make a 6-year-old confused and afraid of her own grandfather. I got up off the floor. I opened the cabinet under the kitchen sink, took the prescription bottle, and put it in a Ziploc bag. Then I put the Ziploc bag inside a paper bag, folded it, and put it on the top shelf of my closet. Then I went back to Cecelia, who was still standing in the doorway watching me with those brown eyes. I asked her if she wanted to watch a movie. She nodded. We watched The Secret Garden, the old one, the 1993 version my wife used to love, and by halfway through, Cecelia had migrated from her end of the couch to mine and was leaning against my arm with the specific bonelessness of a tired child who has decided she is safe. I did not sleep that night. Monday, I called my attorney first thing in the morning. Then I called Dr. Okafor's office when they opened at 8. Dr. Okafor confirmed what I already knew. She had not prescribed any sleep medication for Cecelia. She had not referred Cecelia to any other physician. She asked me to bring the bottle in. My attorney made some calls. The pharmacy in Springboro, it turned out, had received the prescription from Dominic himself. He presented it in person, with a forged signature from a physician whose license number he'd apparently found online. That is a felony in Ohio. More than one felony, actually. Prescriptions for minors carry additional charges. I had Cecelia for 1 more day because Dominic and Sylvia's returns had been delayed, or so they said. I think, in retrospect, they were waiting to hear from Cecelia whether the medication had worked, whether I'd given it to her, whether she seemed different. When Dominic came to pick her up Tuesday afternoon, there were 2 Dayton police officers already at my house. I won't draw that part out. It was loud and then suddenly very quiet. Sylvia started crying in the driveway. Dominic looked at me with an expression I hope I never have to see on another person's face. It was shock, and then comprehension, and then something that looked almost like shame, but wasn't quite, because shame requires you to actually feel bad for what you did to someone else. And I'm not sure he'd gotten there yet. He looked past me at Cecelia, who was standing in the front hallway holding Charlotte's web, which she'd asked to borrow. She looked back at him and didn't say anything. That was the last time she saw either of her parents as free people for quite a while. The charges, child endangerment, prescription fraud, conspiracy, moved faster than I expected. My attorney tells me they both took plea deals to avoid trial. The custody situation took longer. These things always do. There were home studies and court dates and interviews and a guardian ad litem appointed for Cecelia, a calm woman named Miss Tran who drove a sensible car and asked very good questions. Cecelia, it turns out, had quite a bit to say when she was in a room that felt safe, with the right person asking. She also had quite a bit to say to me once she'd started. It didn't all come out at once. It came out the way things come out with a child. Sideways, unexpectedly, in the middle of doing something else entirely. One afternoon in April, we were planting tomatoes in my backyard. She'd gotten very interested in gardening, which I found both touching and slightly hilarious given that I've never successfully kept a plant alive. And she said, without looking up from the dirt, "I wanted to tell you before, but I was scared you'd send me home." I said, "I would never have sent you home." She said, "I know that now." I didn't push her on anything else. I just handed her another tomato seedling and we kept planting. She started speech therapy in March. By April, she was talking to her therapist. By May, she was occasionally talking to the woman at the checkout counter at Kroger, which her therapist said was a significant milestone. She still goes quiet sometimes, in new places, around people she doesn't trust yet, but the silence has a different quality to it now. It's not the silence of a child who's learned that speaking puts people in danger. It's just the silence of someone who is particular about when and where she spends her words. I understand that completely. I always have. The house on Elmhurst Drive has 3 more bedrooms than I need. One of them has a purple comforter on the bed now, because that's the color Cecelia wanted, and when the Child Protective Services finalized the temporary guardianship in June, she carried her unicorn suitcase up the stairs herself and put it in the corner of the room and turned around and said, "This is my room." Not a question. A statement. I said yes. I said that's exactly right. She's been home with me for 4 months now. We have a routine. Cereal in the mornings. She likes the kind with the little marshmallows, which I consider nutritionally indefensible and have stocked in abundance. The nature documentaries are still a daily requirement. She started reading chapter books on her own, which she does in the armchair by the window with her feet tucked under her. And sometimes I'll look up from whatever I'm doing across the room and find her watching me over the top of her book, making sure I'm still there. I always am. My wife would have loved this. She would have loved to see her namesake sitting in that armchair, stubborn and quiet and funny and so much more perceptive than any 6-year-old has any right to be. I talk to Cecelia, my wife, sometimes when it's late and the house is quiet. I tell her things are okay. I tell her the tomatoes are coming in well, which would have surprised her given my historic inability to keep anything growing. I tell her that her granddaughter is the bravest person I've ever known. A child who spent 6 years holding a secret that she knew was dangerous, who was afraid that speaking would cost someone she loved something they couldn't get back, and who decided at the end that the risk of staying silent was greater than the risk of being heard. She didn't save me with anything dramatic. She didn't wave her arms or call 911 or leave a note. She stood in a kitchen doorway in her socks, and she said my name for the first time in her life, and then she told me the truth. Quietly, the way she does everything. "Grandpa," she said. That was enough. That was more than enough. I keep thinking about what it costs a child to stay silent. Not the kind of silence that comes from shyness or from having nothing to say, the other kind. The kind Cecelia lived inside for 6 years, the kind that had a reason behind it, a weight behind it, a fear behind it that no 6-year-old should ever have to carry alone. She watched. She understood. She held what she knew in both hands like something fragile and dangerous, and she didn't let it go until she found the one moment, the one person, where she was certain it was safe to open her hands. That kind of restraint in a child, that kind of clear-eyed, patient courage, it undoes me every time I think about it. I've been a teacher for most of my adult life. History. 31 years of standing in front of rooms full of teenagers who were convinced that nothing that happened before they were born had any bearing on them. I used to tell them that every consequence has a cause, every outcome has a trail of decisions leading to it, that you can follow backward like a thread. I believed that then. I believe it more now. Because the way I look at it, Dominic made choices. He made them over years, quietly. The way people make choices they know won't hold up in the light. He chose to see his daughter's silence as a convenience rather than a condition. He chose to believe that because she didn't speak, she didn't understand. He chose to send her into my house with a bottle of pills designed to make her afraid of the one person who might actually listen to her. Every one of those choices was its own answer to a test he didn't know he was taking, and the grade came back exactly as it should have. That's not fate. That's not punishment from some higher authority. That's just the plain arithmetic of who you are catching up to you eventually. And Cecelia, my Cecelia, she passed every version of that same test, over and over, for 6 years, without anyone knowing she was taking it. She had the moral clarity to know that what her father was planning was wrong. She had the intelligence to stay quiet and wait for the right moment rather than act out of fear and make things worse. And she had the grit, the sheer stubborn, socks on the kitchen floor grit, to say out loud the things she'd been holding in silence since she was old enough to understand it. Character is what you do when no one expects anything from you, when everyone has already decided you can't do it, when the people who are supposed to protect you have written you off as a variable they don't need to account for. She was 6 years old, and she had more of it than anyone I've ever known. I'm 67. I have a colonial house on Elmhurst Drive with more rooms than I need, and tomatoes coming in better than they have any right to, given my history with plants. I have a granddaughter in a purple comforted room at the top of the stairs who reads with her feet tucked under her and checks on me over the top of her book. I used to think the point of getting older was accumulating things, wisdom maybe, or peace. Now I think it's simpler than that. I think the point is just being someone worth talking to. Someone safe enough that a child who hasn't spoken in 6 years decides finally to say your name. She said mine. That's enough. That's everything.